It's
and
Oddworld.
Hey oddballs, I'm your host Jensen, and welcome to episode 65. I just have to know, have you guys watched Legacies on Netflix? I am thoroughly enjoying it, and probably behind. I already know that because there's like 4 or 5 seasons, maybe more, and I'm just getting caught up, but it's really good. It's got vampires and werewolves, and it's a magic school basically. It's just really good. And there are all kinds of like creatures and things. And if you like my podcast, you might like that. I don't know. Point is I'm really liking it. And if you guys like it, let me know how you feel about it. But it also is kind of inspiring today's mythical creature lesson. Not even kind of. It totally is. So we're going to learn about a mythical creature. It's lesson
Time.
Today's mythical creature lesson is the Phoenix. This mythical marvel embodies death and rebirth in Greek mythology. But hold on, it's not a physical death. It's more like a spiritual or emotional transformation coming your way. Don't worry though, because just like the phoenix rising from the ashes, you'll emerge stronger than ever. It might signify upcoming challenges when you keep bumping into the phoenix or dreaming about it. But guess what? With the phoenix's strength by your side, you'll conquer them all. And here's a cool twist. Encountering the phoenix could signal that you'll soon have a chance to use your inner strength and passions for some greater good. So keep your eyes peeled for that fantastic opportunity. Just remember, this isn't like what a phoenix is. It's what the phoenix represents in your life. And also, if you know what I'm talking about as far as the TV show goes, thumbs up. And if you don't, I'm sorry, go watch it. But I could sit here and ramble all day, and I'm not going to. So let's go ahead and move on to stories.
This comes from cornmeal-jo on Reddit.
For a bit of background, this was one of my first significant one-on-one run-ins with the unknown. I had just gotten out of the army, and I was living in a small Pennsylvania town with my ex-wife that is primarily built around the steel industry. However, once the company went out of business, it took the town with it. Unemployment and general lawlessness was the order of the day. Drive-by shootings, gruesome drug-related murders, kidnappings, and rampant drug use. That is to say, the whole town had a heaviness to it. But at least the rent was cheap. As I mentioned earlier, I had just finished my contract with the Army after having been deployed to Afghanistan doing route clearance missions just a year prior. I guess, as it is to be expected, I was having a hell of a time readjusting back to civilian life, and as a result, my ex and I spent most of our time getting into vicious verbal arguments and occasional physical fights. Taking long walks at all hours of the day or night was my preferred method of avoiding either of these confrontations. It usually involved me walking around town during the day or around our large block during the evenings and early mornings. This particular night was no different. I made my escape and headed out to the poorly lit streets for at least 3 hours. After completing my 6th circuit, I decided that things had probably calmed down enough for me to try to get some sleep. As by this point it was already 4 a.m. and I was extremely tired. And sore. As I turned the corner that led to my block's stretch of sidewalk, I suddenly saw a dark figure appear right outside the chain-link fence that surrounded my small front yard. My first thought was that this was a burglar. After all, that sort of extracurricular activity wasn't all that uncommon in this town. Hell, most took place during the day. Either way, I was upset that he'd potentially gotten the drop on me like that, considering that my hypervigilance was partly what kept me alive overseas. About 15 seconds of us stumbling across each other, I was suddenly hit with a wave of utter terror, dread, and despair that gives me chills just thinking about it nearly 10 years later. To make matters worse, my foe began walking in a way that I couldn't tell whether he was walking towards me or away from me. Perhaps the best way to describe it is, he was walking in place, appearing as though he was getting closer before switching to getting further. Time slowed down and my heart sped up, and then I began to walk. I couldn't help it. My brain was screaming at my legs to stop, but they kept going as though they were being pulled by an unseen force. It was at this point I got a semi-better look at this individual, though all I could really make out was his dark outline, despite him standing almost directly under a street lamp. Of course, this just ramped up my anxiety to 100. It was also when the nausea and lightheadedness set in. At some point, I was able to regain some control over my legs, forcing them to take small baby steps instead of large strides that whatever this was had me doing. However, I was still getting closer and closer to them, and them me. By this point, there were only 3 houses between us, when I was able to make out that he was wearing not only a hood, but what looked like a cape as well. The dread I was feeling went into max overdrive when it hit me that I wasn't dealing with a human. There were only 2 houses in between, and I began to pray that God would step in and save me from this being. After what felt like an eternity, I could finally see that they were actually beginning to walk away from me and towards the opposite end of the block. Clearly it wasn't too happy, as it began flapping its cape angrily, almost like a cat flicking its own tail when it's pissed off. Within seconds, it was completely gone from my line of sight, disappearing as quickly as it had come. I was immediately able to regain full control over my legs and overcome the nausea long enough to run up to my front door and pound on it until my ex let me in. She wasn't overly happy, but I could have cared less by that point. To this day, I fully believe what I encountered was a demon, that either was drawn to our home because of the constant turmoil, or the cause of it. Either way, it still sends shivers up my spine whenever I tell this story, and I hope that I never, ever run into that thing again. That is scary as hell. No. Nope. That's all I can say is no. And the fact that it's taking over your body and making you walk towards it, but also I appreciate the fact that this person thinks that it could have been because of what was going on in his home life that caused this to happen, or it was either this entity or what was going on that just kind of gave it strength in a sense, because that's exactly what I was going to say. And so I'm assuming that since they're not seeing this thing anymore, because their life is a little more put together, should I say, and yeah, I hope you never see it ever again too, because that's freaking terrifying. It also makes me wonder if okay, it's only because, like I said in the beginning, I'm watching Legacies, and I'm going to ruin this, but there's a part where there's a cape and there's a person in it. Okay, that was kind of stupid, but there's a person in a cape and they're doing things. And so that's the only thing I can think of, but they're not good. They're not a good person. So that's the other thing that I can think of, is maybe it was a person, but they were coaxing you. And yes, I am stretching again and really reaching for something, but that's just because my brain has been watching things. And anyhow, I'm going to shut up. That is really scary. I am so sorry that happened to you. I'm glad you haven't seen it again. I have never heard a story like this before. If you've had a story like this, let me know. I hope you haven't, but if you have, let me know, because, oh my God, that is scary. That is so scary. And we're gonna move on to the next story.
This comes from Jeneefur on Reddit.
When I was young, I stole a Ouija board from Spencer's and played around with it a couple of times with a couple of friends. I ended up putting it in the bottom drawer of my dresser to hide it from my parents. At some point, I'd start glancing over there while trying to sleep, feeling uncomfortable, like there was some kind of presence in the drawer. I didn't really know what to do, so I took it out back and buried it by the big pine tree. I looked for it several years later, but couldn't find it because the ivy was so overgrown. My parents have been divorced for quite a while now, and I don't live in that house anymore. I haven't talked to my dad in 9 years, but my mom has said that he thinks the house is haunted, complaining about his keys and other things disappearing or getting moved somewhere else. Not to mention a bunch of other bad or strange things that went on there. But that would take a really long time to talk about. Neither of my parents know about the Ouija board, and they are both religious. I have an occasional strange dream about the pool back there always being absolutely filthy and scary creatures living in it. I suffer from depression and anxiety too. I wish I could go and find it and deal with it somehow, but the situation is complicated. Yikes. We probably shouldn't have done that, but we were all young kids at one point, so, it is what it is. I mean, I don't know how close this person is with their dad, but maybe somehow you can, just trick them into going over there, or just, go over there when they're not there and start digging. Or just be like, look, dude, here's what it is. I'm just gonna lay it out for you. I played with a Ouija board a long time ago. I know it sounds crazy, and I know that it's totally wrong, but I just need to dig it up and get rid of it. I would totally do that with my parents, but it's not like they're super religious, so I don't know if that changes things. It's not that they're not religious, it's just, I don't know, when I think of super religious, I think this would be super devastating and oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. That kind of thing, where my mom's religious, but she'll go ghost hunting with me because she loves it. So obviously this situation is complicated for this person. And if you guys have any suggestions as to what they can do other than just barging in and being like, yo, I gotta dig something up, just let me know. Also, I meant to ask this person if they closed the Ouija board. That is the only thing that I would say to do if you do get a chance to dig it up, is to just move the planchette over to goodbye. And that goes for any paranormal equipment that you use in general. You should always say goodbye and always tell the spirits not to follow you home and that they have to stay where they are. That is just something that I do and will live by whenever I investigate. Anyhow, if you have a story like either story today or just any paranormal story in general, I would love to hear it. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And well, it's an odd world after all.
Oddballs, go follow us on It's an Odd World After All podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Also, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you have a story you would like to share, email us at itsanOddWorldAfterAll@gmail.com or message us on one of our social platforms. Don't forget to share us with your family and friends. And check out our website, itsanOddWorldAfterAll.com.